With the 10 Formula 1 teams taking a well-earned August break and 14 race weekends in the record books, there's no better time to evaluate their performance so far. We're going to assess each team and allocate them a school report grade. That will be a letter from A to F, A being excellent, F being terrible, to reflect the overall level of the team. Then, there are 3 available subdivisions, for example B+, B or B-, to reflect the team's effectiveness in maximising the potential of its car on track. But there's a twist. It would be too easy to assign those based purely on championship position, so we're grading the teams based on their performance against realistic expectations going into the season. We'll also explain why we've awarded the grade we have and give an overview of the strengths and weaknesses of each and every team. Red Bull has had a decent season on track by the standards of most teams, but this isn't just any other team, it's the one that has dominated the current rules era. Therefore, nothing less than a championship challenge is acceptable. 2 wins plus a sprint victory simply isn't good enough, especially amid the upheaval of team principal Christian Horner's sudden departure and the trials and tribulations of the second car. Max Verstappen has been the team's saviour, producing against the odds wins at Suzuka, Imola and on Saturday at Spa, but even he can't defy the laws of physics of a car he says is limiting him from going fast. These balance limitations, with understeer too often inhibiting him mid-corner, have persisted from last year. At the Hungaroring before the August break, the team was also baffled by the all-round lack of grip. While progress has been made with the car, it's not been anywhere near enough. That's why Verstappen is now out of realistic Drivers' Championship contention, a massive 97 points off leader Oscar Piastri. There are signs of progress, with the upgrade introduced before the break in Belgium working well, but it's nowhere near enough. Verdict: D. Solid execution trackside flatters Red Bull. Sauber was all over the place in pre-season testing in Bahrain, forced into a narrow mechanical window with a car that didn't give the drivers confidence to attack. That improved for the first race of the season in Australia, where the proper 2025 specification front wing, side pods and floor appeared. The Sauber was tricky to drive, but could at least get into Q2 with a good performance. But it was the Spanish Grand Prix floor upgrade that transformed its season. That made the car not only quicker, but crucially far less peaky and easier to drive. Subsequent evolutions of the floor introduced at the Red Bull Ring and Silverstone built on that. It's made the Sauber a regular point scorer, with Nico Hülkenberg bagging a podium finish at Silverstone thanks to a brilliantly executed race in the wet. As Gabriel Bortoleto says, it's still not easy to drive, but it's a strong car on race pace in particular. Sauber has gone from embarrassment to a consistent and credible midfield performer. Grade: B+, tangible progress ahead of Audi transformation. After last year's near miss in the Constructors' Championship, expectations were high at Ferrari, but it has spectacularly failed to meet them. Ferrari has managed just 5 podium finishes, as well as Lewis Hamilton's unexpected win in the China sprint race. As Charles Leclerc says, the team's struggles have been made even worse by the hype, and he's not just talking about external expectations there, because Ferrari expected big things. Changes to the car for 2025, pushing the cockpit rearwards and shortening the gearbox to facilitate that within the same wheelbase to open up aerodynamic opportunities, didn't pay off as expected. The central damper at the rear was tightly packaged and not powerful enough to provide adequate ride height control. The result was a car that had to run higher than intended, shedding downforce. Rear suspension upgrades at Spa tackled that and gave Leclerc in particular more confidence with the car when on edge, but it's still not enough. And even when the car does qualify at the front, as Leclerc did in Hungary, problems mean it fades. Add to that, Hamilton struggles to adapt, although his performance level has been a little better than the results indicate, and it's made for a painful year at Maranello. Verdict: D. Winless when a title push was required. After its strong finish to 2024 and promising pace in pre-season testing, Alpine appeared to be a contender to lead the midfield. Instead, it's rock bottom. The primary problem is the power unit's weakness in terms of energy recovery. This not only means setup compromises, but also often leads to race pace being worse than qualifying pace. The chassis itself is not bad, strong in the faster corners in particular, and that has made it the 7th fastest car on average on single lap pace. However, it has also been an erratic performer, and it would be a mistake to characterise this purely as let down by the power unit side. It's also weak on traction and struggles on the bumps. As Pierre Gasly, who has hauled the Alpine to all of its points, says, it's simply not possible to finish in the top 10 consistently. Add to that the mismanagement of the second driver, with Jack Doohan and replacement Franco Colapinto contributing no points, and the sudden departure of team principal Ollie Oakes, and it makes for a desultory season. Verdict: F. Simply not good enough. No team has led the midfield pack more frequently than Racing Bulls in 2025. It is what is by design a relatively benign and consistent car that gives the drivers confidence, albeit one that doesn't quite have as much downforce as they would like. The main criticism of Racing Bulls is this pace hasn't translated into points as consistently as it should have done. Although that's partly down to the enforced swap of Yuki Tsunoda and Lawson after 2 races, there are also occasions, such as Australia and China, where strategic errors cost significant points. But there were upgrades for the recent Belgian Grand Prix, including a diffuser geometry tweak, with a little more to come after the August break. As team principal Alan Permain says, it has a car that, when everything is right, can be top of the midfield. That was demonstrated spectacularly well in Austria, where Liam Lawson qualified and finished 6th. Racing Bulls is still in the mix to be the leading midfield team, with its single lap pace comparable to Williams, but improvements must be made in race weekend execution to ensure it scores the points that the car deserves, because it hasn't made the most of a quick machine. Grade B-, decent car but needs to up strike rate. 2 problems have blighted Mercedes in 2025. The first is its long-standing struggle as the temperature rises, the second the problems with the rear suspension upgrade it introduced for the 7th race of the season at Imola. The upgrade, which improved the anti-lift characteristics, ultimately made the car more unstable. Although Mercedes won with it in Canada, where it worked well thanks to the short duration corners and the amount of straight line braking required, the fact that the W16 was so competitive after reverting the suspension specification at the Hungaroring was telling. That's why team principal Toto Wolff says it will end up in the bin for good. There have been some encouraging signs, notably the fact that the car seems to inspire confidence in the drivers when it's in the right window and specification. But Mercedes has ended up in much the same position as it was last year, able to challenge for victory on its day, but generally 3rd or 4th best. Verdict C-, little progress relative to its rivals. Aston Martin has been all over the map in 2025. No more starkly has that been illustrated than in the double-header preceding the August break, where it was slowest in Belgium but headed the midfield in Hungary. Its performance level at 2 very different tracks is telling. As Fernando Alonso highlighted, the car didn't really change between the 2 events. The long-standing struggle for aerodynamic efficiency made Spa a nightmare, but running the older specification floor introduced at Imola at the Hungaroring allowed the car to be strong in the medium-speed corners on top of exhibiting good traction. Having started the season badly, Aston has at least improved to the point where it can be a threat at the front of the midfield on favourable tracks, and it does seem to at least have a better handle on what's working and what isn't than last year. Verdict C+, solid recovery but poor start. Williams has surged to the front of F1's midfield in 2025, meaning it's not only 5th in the Constructors' Championship but also has a handy points advantage. At its best, the Williams FW47 has been the class of the midfield and snapped at the heels of the Big Four. That's allowed Alex Albon to take 4 top 6 finishes. However, its form has fluctuated according to track characteristics. In particular, in longer corners with combination entries and when running at maximum downforce, it has been difficult. However, the recent Silverstone aerodynamic upgrade helped to claw back performance losses to its midfield rivals. The long-standing focus on 2026 and the new regulations means Williams quickly cut back on wind tunnel time for the 2025 car. That means there will be no further upgrades this year, a risk team principal James Vowles believes is justified even if it costs Williams 5th in the championship. With rivals closing in, it could be on for a tough run-in after the August break. Grade A-, a big step forward, but a few fumbles. Haas remains the smallest team in F1 with the lowest ceiling in terms of performance potential. That means that while it slipped back after finishing 7th in the championship last year, it still had a good season. At first, Haas looked in serious trouble. Aerodynamic oscillations at high speed cost over half a second in the turn 9-10 sweep at Albert Park in the season-opening Australian Grand Prix and left it a distant last. Things were so bad it made team principal Ayo Komatsu feel sick. A hastily produced floor upgrade, one that had never been in the wind tunnel, mitigated the problem for the 3rd race at Suzuka, and the Haas VF25 has proved to be a handy midfield weapon. At its best, it can lead the way in the mid-pack, but points have been patchier than they should have been. However, the recent Silverstone upgrade has boosted its performance, in particular for Behrman, who described it as feeling like a Ferrari. Haas should have more points, having squandered too many opportunities, but it has produced another quick car capable of competing for the top 10 on most weekends. Verdict C-, pace not always reflected in results. Given it has won 11 out of 14 Grand Prix, is a massive 299 points clear in the Constructors' Championship, and has made the drivers' title battle an intra-team affair, McLaren couldn't have done much better this year. The car is fast everywhere, thriving particularly in medium-speed corners. As team principal Andrea Stella points out, the GPS data doesn't lie, and it's the standard setter in the mid-range. Despite hopes among rivals that the front-wing flexibility technical directive introduced for the 9th race of the season in Spain might derail it, McLaren has continued to thrive, bagging 5-1-2s in the last 6 races. The sole criticism is that both drivers have said since the start of the year the car can be tricky to get the most out of. Even Oscar Piastri, who has seemingly adapted to the car that bit better than Lando Norris has, admits to that. Thanks to its outstanding rear tyre temperature management, the McLaren's often slender advantage in qualifying usually turns into a dominant one in race situations. Verdict: A. Achieving everything it set out to.